Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is Let the Record Show. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. With me is my good friend, esteemed colleague, Jesse Garcia, the Vice Chair of the State Republican Party, County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party, Eric Levine, the great lawyer, essayist, and political commentator, and our good friend and frequent guest, and Matt Taylor, who, with his wife Michelle, produced a great award-winning documentary called Gotham, The Fall and Rise of New York City. And we're all going to be talking together today. Eric has to flee across the street because he has a paying client coming, so I have to let him off. I have to let him off the hook.
Oh, the horrors of capitalism.
So, well, AOC will take that away from you soon. All right.
So Kathy Hochul's doing a good enough job.
All right. So let us begin. Gentlemen, death on the subway. I call this false narratives, true facts, a tragic tale of our times. Let me give you my take on this. I don't believe in vigilantism. I don't believe people should be taking the law into their own hands. But that is not what happened in that terrible tragedy on the subway. What happened on the subway was a Marine who was trained to protect and defend his fellow citizens, his fellow human beings, acted to protect all those innocent passengers on the car when a mentally deranged individual started throwing garbage, started threatening to assault and to kill people on that subway car. A man who obviously was a threat to other people, and it turns out had an arrest record going over 40 arrests and had an outstanding bench warrant for a violent assault where he broke a woman's face. And that was the man perceived by the Marine, who was a good Samaritan, not a vigilante, a good Samaritan who did the right thing. And let us be very, very clear. There's no one who rides the subways in this city who has any common sense or any instinct for self-preservation who does not believe that they would love to have a guy like this Marine on the car with him. Because when they say, well, how do you know he's going to hurt anybody? You never know. And I tell you, 15 years on the bench, you never know when somebody's going to pull out a knife, a razor blade, a paint scraper, and cut you to pieces in a split second. So this Marine did the right thing. In my humble opinion, charges never should have been brought. And I hope the grand jury has a good sense not to indict. All right, let's start. Eric, what's your take?
So this is what happens when government completely abdicates its responsibility to perform its primary duty, and that is to protect its citizenry. We have a perfect storm. We have vilification of cops who are persuaded it's not worth their time to arrest people. You have a pro-criminal bail reform, and you have a social justice agenda that sees everything through the lens of race and gender. So when this occurs, when Jordan Neeley started carrying on in the subway system, as you point out, he had outstanding warrants. I think he was arrested 45 times. Now, Daniel Penny, the Marine, did not know this. He's not completely unaware of what his criminal arrest record was. But he could see that people were being threatened. And he, as you point out, he's not an idiot. Anyone who reads the papers or rides the subways or who breathes or is sensate understands that there's a threat to riding the subway system. And this guy was carrying on and threatening people. And he stepped forward to help. So you have protesters standing on the tracks demanding that Daniel Penny be arrested. But where were they when Jordan Neeley needed mental health care? Where were they when Jordan Neeley was constantly just going through a revolving door in the criminal justice system and threatening the community? Where were they when Jordan Neeley needed a job or an education? Where were they? They were nowhere. They only showed up because a white man, a Marine, killed a black man, Jordan Neeley. And they thought it was their duty to virtue signal and go through the required steps of claiming your systemic racism. What else could it be? Daniel Penny did not get on the subway, as you point out. He's not a vigilante. He did not get on the subway to interact with anyone. He was just going to work, or he was going to see a friend. He was just riding the subway. And you can tell by the fact that there's been $2 million raised in a GoFundMe page to pay for this guy's defense that New Yorkers get it. And what compounds the problem is you have a district attorney, Alvin Bragg, who's driven by politics. The weaponization of the criminal justice system under Alvin Bragg has really been a disaster. So it calls into question anything and everything he does. I've said it before on the show, and I've said it in things that I've written. Anybody who knows me, I am no fan of Donald Trump. Donald Trump should not be allowed near the White House. But his criminal prosecution of Donald Trump is a weaponization and a political move by Alvin Bragg. And this is the same thing. He sees a white man who has put a black man in a chokehold and unfortunately dies. He didn't deserve to die, but accidents happen, things happen. And it wasn't until people started protesting that Alvin Bragg decided that he needed to indict him. I agree with you. He should not be indicted. Hopefully that the grand jury will not vote to indict and that he'll be able to go on with his life. He'll feel guilty for the rest of his life. There's no question. This is a guy with a conscience. But this is what happens when you politicize the criminal justice system. And this is what happens primarily when government turns its back on its primary duty of protecting its citizens.
All right. Now, Matt Taylor, you did an extraordinary documentary with your wife, Michelle. It was called Gotham, The Fall and Rise of New York City. And you focused on the dangers that people faced and perceived in the bad old days of lawlessness in New York City. And one of the things that you were pointing out, the message was, we know exactly what needs to be done. We just have to have the will and the wisdom to do it. What do you say, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, look, this kind of parallels the famous Bernie Goetz case, right? And what's crazy about the Bernie Goetz case is he shot 5 individuals on the subway, and the city came to his aid.
Right, but Bernie Goetz showed up on the subway with a gun that he was not allowed to have. This guy just got on the subway to go to work.
Yeah, and when that's the thing. I mean, like, it's the city, I feel that New Yorkers, first of all, they've now been living in this paradise of a wonderful city for almost 30 years, and they don't want this behavior in these public spaces. Because, again, public space is very critical to New Yorkers. We live in tiny apartments. We work in tiny offices. The moments on the subway, the moments in the park, those are super, super important to be able to survive in a city and an infrastructure and an ecosystem like this. And so, safety needs to be paramount, needs to be number one. And the city had that safety for almost 30 years, and now it is gone. And here's the thing. This is one case out of many things that are happening around the city. There's a lot of bad things happening, a lot of people being murdered, especially in minority communities, and nobody is standing on the subway tracks for any of those people, which is very upsetting to me. You have to be upset about all the people that are being assaulted and murdered.
Right. Those communities are the ones most victimized by crime.
Absolutely.
The minority communities are the ones who suffer most when society turns their back.
Yeah. Yeah, East New York, Brownsville, parts of Harlem. This is happening all the time. You can go on YouTube and watch videos of assaults and things that are happening everywhere, and I don't hear a single voice saying anything about it.
Well, that's the problem, because what happens is everything has become politicized. Everything is seen through the lens of an ideological narrative. Facts don't matter. They use inflammatory rhetoric. For example, the AOC types and Al Sharpton talk about you should be charged with murder. Well, they have no knowledge of what the law is. They say, well, there was a homicide. A homicide is merely a term of art used by a medical examiner, says it's death by another. It doesn't mean there's any criminal act or criminal intent. And the fact of the matter is that you don't even have a reckless disregard, which was the manslaughter charge, manslaughter 2, that Bragg has charged in a criminal complaint. And you probably don't even have criminal negligence, because The standard there is what would a reasonable person do under similar circumstances. So this is a big issue. Jesse, what's your take on this?
My take is that look at the other. I agree with the two gentlemen that spoke before me, but what I think we take a look at this is the fact that Marines are trained to engage to subdue and to kill for survival. It was clear by the video and the many videos that we saw that the Marine had put him into a chokehold to subdue him and then released him, and then everyone was trying to then assist him or resuscitate him. I also take point that this, we've identified that he had a long record. He had open warrants, and even the intended victim of this assailant was the one who thanked the Marine for what he did. I'm not surprised that the GoFundMe page was at $2 million. This Marine hails from Suffolk County, who comes from Islip, and while our other guest commentators, hope, and yourself, Your Honor, hope for the grand jury to reverse these charges and not move forward. I'm not as hopeful. Number one, the grand jury is one-sided. It's prosecutorial only, and it's going to be just a continuation of the social justice agenda, not the criminal justice agenda, the social justice agenda that the District Attorney Bragg is going to come forward. I think he should not have responded to the mob. As Eric said, where were all these people when this, now year, when he was assaulting subway riders, innocent subway riders, months and years before? It's only when a tragedy like this, that they want to turn this into a political propaganda event, that it now becomes a show. And unfortunately, we have spineless we have spineless district attorneys that only care about their own personal political agenda and weaponization of their office.
Eric.
I just want to pick up one thing that you mentioned, Richard, when you talk about Al Sharpton. I can't let this pass because people have to remember who Al Sharpton is. He is one of the greatest race baiters and racists in New York City history. This is the same guy that talked about Jewish interlopers in Harlem that caused Freddie's business to be burned to the ground. This is the guy that helped perpetrate and get started the pogrom in Brooklyn, which led to death. What's his name? Isaac Rosenblum? I forgot his name.
Yeah,
Rosenblum, who was killed in a pogrom. David Dinkins never allowed the police to intercede, just let the riot go and go and go, and the Jews were beat up. And Al Sharpton was out there cheering them on. Let's remember who Al Sharpton is. It really takes a lot of chutzpah, or as Bill Clinton would say, a brass pair, to stand up there and start calling people racist. Al Sharpton's one of the great racists of our time.
He's made a whole career out of being a race baiter.
That's how he made that is his career.
He makes his
living out of being a race baiter. Exactly. So it really makes me crazy when I hear people saying Al Sharpton said. Why anyone cares what Al Sharpton said is beyond my comprehension.
Well, and Obama used to bring him to the White House all the time.
Al
Biden.
Al Sharpton. If you look at the records, the logs of the White House, Al Sharpton is as a private citizen met with Obama more than any other U.S. citizen in the United States.
And what do you think, Matt?
Well, I think race has been an intense issue in this city for a very long time, and it doesn't have to be. You see these issues again, like with the what's it called, the riots in which we covered in the movie, and I just blanked on what it is. And you see
in
throughout
Crown Heights,
Crown Heights riots.
Yeah.
You see through the Crown Heights riots. You see this methodology of the left using these riots. I mean, going back to the '60s to basically force policy in certain ways, force public officials to do things. And of course, in the '90s, they pushed back. And so I think what we've seen is definitely since 2020, when half the city was burning, everybody has kind of put their heads in the sand and handed it over to this mob. And you saw it across the nation. But here was especially it pushed. The police are not going to engage in certain things if they think they're going to get blown out the airlock when something happens, and that puts every citizen in the city in danger. They don't even know it. Like, that's the worst part. They're walking around. They have no idea that this can flare up at any second. and all of a sudden you have a massive problem.
Well, Jesse, if you recall, and you and I have talked about this, during the election campaign of 2020, because of the death of another individual, there were riots all over the country. Black Lives Matter created a shakedown operation, a payoff operation, where they got tens and maybe hundreds of millions of dollars from corporations and people who had virtue signaling intentions, show how wonderful they were. Okay, that money was never accounted for. And remember what the big fear was, Jesse? That if Trump got reelected, the riots would first begin. What do you have to say, Jesse?
Well, we do know where some of the money went. It went to people, into the organizers purchasing $1 million homes and luxury items. So I don't think that went to help the lives of black families. And it was never intended to do that. It was just to perpetuate their own agenda. The race baiting that goes on here always comes from the left. It comes from the left for them to wash away and deflect away from any issue that's more pressing in the minds of voters or in the minds of taxpayers and residents. And in this case, I don't see the same level of it, fortunately, and I think it's because we ran and we lived through the 2020 riots. But I still don't understand how we can have elected officials like Biden, Hochul, Adams, and other Democrats that say it's okay to burn down a city, for one reason, and yet we have to go after parents and call them domestic terrorists because they're attending school board meetings. It's hypocrisy at its highest.
All right. Kevin has given us that famous signal that he's known from coast to coast on. We're going to be taking a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, esteemed essayist, political commentator, and attorney Eric Levine, and our very special guest, Matt Taylor, the co-producer with his wife, Michelle, of...
How many specials do I get?
You only get one, I'm sorry, Eric. Of Gotham, the fall and rise of New York City. We'll be back in a moment for more interesting conversations. Don't go away.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, Eric Levine, and Matt Taylor. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. I want to pick up on the Durham Report. And the thesis of the Durham Report, there was a special counsel appointed by Attorney General Barr, John Durham, and it was an investigation of the allegations that there was Russian collusion between Trump and the Russian political apparatus and governmental apparatus. The Durham Report has come down very hard and said as follows. There was no collusion. There was never a basis for the investigation. The whole thing was, forgive the expression, trumped up. It was all nonsense. And there was either ineptitude on the part of, if you want to be kind, to the FBI and the Justice Department types, or there was actually political bias on that event. And what that event did, that so-called Russia collusion, is it tried to disrupt the presidential campaign of Trump as a deflection against what Hillary Clinton is alleged to have done wrong in terms of her computers and her laptops and her funding, and to try to undermine his campaign. And then when he became president, another way of trying to throw his administration off track. And that's the Durham Report in essence. Eric, your turn.
So the whole point behind the dirty trick of Hillary Clinton of trying to tie Trump to Russian intelligence and that they were somehow trying to steal the election, the two of them, backfired. And James Comey, who was part and parcel of this with Hillary Clinton, whether they spoke to one another, he certainly aided it and abetted it. In the way he handled it, this is how you elect Donald Trump. This is how you play into his "I am a victim."
You're talking about a new election campaign, 2024.
No, yes. But first, when they first tried it, remember what happened? Comey was going back and forth on whether or not he should indict Hillary Clinton on her laptop and the secret documents that were on the laptop, and then ultimately decides not to do it, and then he opens it up again, and then he decides at the very end we're not going to indict Hillary Clinton. This is even though after a subpoena is issued, she destroys documents and she destroys a laptop, I mean, after subpoena and you destroy evidence, that's a crime. But she's never prosecuted. So this is the same woman who now tries to perpetrate the Russia hoax, trying to say that, Donald Trump is trying to steal the election along with the Russians. So Donald Trump can stand up and say, double standard, double standard, double standard. And you know what?
He's right.
He's right. He's right.
He's
and
right.
And the problem is, if you really want Donald Trump to lose, don't play into the fact that there is this double standard, and don't try to make him a victim, because his whole point is, you need me because I have to fight this system. I have to drain the swamp. This is proof that there's a swamp. But two things can be true. Donald Trump can be right that there is a swamp that needs to be drained. But what is also true is he's not the guy to do it. But you end up empowering him when you do this. And then once he's in office and they're running with the Russia hoax, the FBI knew it was nonsense. MSNBC and CNN, they all knew it was nonsense. But they ran with it. It was an attempted coup. It was indeed an attempted coup. He was a legitimately elected president in a fair and free election. I thought Democrats liked those, but I guess only when Democrats win. And they were trying to unseat him. They were trying to undermine his presidency. So now we come to 2024. The Durham Report is released, and the Russia hoax is now going to come back and bite the Democrats in the tuchus, and it's going to end up biting the Republicans in the rear end as well, because it only empowers Donald Trump. He needs to be able to say, "I am a victim. Rally behind me. I am a victim," and it plays to his strength. It plays to his base, and it's really unbelievable. So I think at some point, people have to start, if they want to stop Donald Trump from being the nominee, or if they want to stop Donald Trump from being president, stop giving him town halls and special places on television because you want ratings, and stop applying double standards and making him a
martyr.
A martyr. I mean, it's really to make Donald Trump sympathetic takes a lot of effort, but they've succeeded.
Okay. Matt, your take on this.
I saw a hilarious post on Instagram today. The only people not involved in the Russian hoax is Russia and Donald Trump. Right. So, and it really struck me that, this is absolutely true. And so, what's interesting about it is that, this clearly has the Clinton fingerprints all over it. Remember Sandy Berger stealing the Millennial Obama report and a number of other things that happened in the 90s and the early 2000s. To protect the Clintons or sway things. What really makes me terrified about this particular operation is that it seems that the intelligence community in some ways is operating clandestinely against elected officials. And that to me is really terrifying. You've always heard the story of using the IRS to go after political enemies and things as the president. But, the intelligence community seems to be putting this as a moral imperative to topple elected officials within their own government. And I think this is something that I don't think people are taking seriously enough. And it frightens me to my core.
Jesse, your take.
I think what Matt just said is what frightens and concerns the American people at its core, that you have the deep state, wherever it may be, IRS, CIA, FBI, that they are the ones that are interfering with elections. They are the ones that are trying to politicize and weaponize different segments of the government because of their chosen candidate is not being successful or not. And I think that, we all agree there is a double standard that's going on here. There's a double standard first between whatever, the Clintons and Democrats do and Donald Trump. And that waves into the Department of Justice, the FBI, the CIA, the intelligence community, and so on and so forth. It even goes down basically to the local judiciaries and prosecutors, like here in Manhattan. But there's also those that are also fearful, where it's almost pinning Americans against their government. That if they could do this to a former sitting president, or they can do this to an elected official, they're shaping the electorate, their elected officers, and they're shaping the political system. That's something that we've rejected. It's innate in our DNA, something that rejects us. And I think what comes up in the Durham Report is the number of milestones and fact-check locations that were bypassed by the FBI to get to their conclusions, to get to their Russia hoax narrative. Based on unverified intelligence, not double sourcing the facts on this, their own internal bias. That's what's frightening to the American people. And unfortunately or fortunately, the way you want to look at it, the person is there as the perfect example of the double standard between the D and the American people, how they've treated Donald Trump, whether it be at this level or even level in Manhattan District Attorney's Office.
Well, let's go back to what happened with Hillary Clinton. First of all, Comey got up there and made his remarks, and he laid out what we call in the law business, a bill of particulars, why this was indictable offenses by Hillary Clinton in terms of her laptop and violating federal law in terms of confidentiality and secrecy of governmental information. Laid it out, and then he said, but no reasonable prosecutor would take this case. Well, I'm not trying to go after Hillary Clinton, but that conclusion was a false conclusion. That was a convenient conclusion. He let her off the hook. It wasn't, and by the way, let's be very, very clear. He was director of the FBI. He was not the Attorney General of the United States. He was not speaking as a prosecutor. He was speaking as a director of the FBI, which is an investigative agency. It's a fact gatherer. It wasn't for him to let her off the hook. So that in itself was a double standard. Also, when they investigated and they had Hillary Clinton in the room, what they did was they allowed her lawyers in the room. Later, those lawyers were themselves deposed. Those lawyers who were witnesses should never have been in that room with her. A double standard. Then, all along when they were going after Trump, the first thing they did is they weaponized the whole process to go after Trump, whereas they were giving early warning signals and protections to Hillary Clinton. So let the record be clear here. That's what happened. That's why you have a double standard. And Eric Levine's take that you're giving Trump an opportunity to play the victim card, which only rallies his base, is absolutely correct. And he's also correct, Eric, when he says that you have to separate out the two. Yes, it's absolutely wrong that they did this to Trump. And in fact, Attorney General Barr has just come out and stated that what they did was absolutely wrong. But it doesn't mean it's the same thing as that Trump should be elected. But my problem, and we'll talk about this later on, my problem is if you have a Trump-Biden election, then you better damn well have a close look at what Biden has done to this country in the last couple of years in his administration on every level of governance, whether it's the economy, national security, the border, any issue that he's dealt with, the woke New Deal, the political correctness, the racial politics. So you have to put his record against Trump's. As I've often said, he has an unfortunate personality, that is the Donald, but he was a very good president, a lot of issues that made this country a better and safer place. Matt.
Yeah, I want to follow up with that. I mean, look, let's be honest. There was an assumption that Hillary Clinton was going to win, right? And because of the assumption that she was going to win, they could do whatever they wanted and it would get excused and washed out like it was in the 90s. And no one figured that Donald Trump would win. So they said, well, it doesn't really matter what we do. We can do this. We can skirt that. We can bend this rule and bend that rule because when she's president, it all will disappear like it did in the 90s. But it didn't. It didn't pan out that way. And what we've watched for the last 6 years is cover up after cover up to try to, obfuscate the fact that like all these people and across all of these organizations did all these bad things. And so I think we're probably looking at the same kind of behavior going into 2024, and people need to be prepared because now we have it's roadmap. They mapped it out for how it works.
Well, that's a very interesting segue because I want to raise the issue now of the whole Hunter Biden situation. Are we ever going to get the truth, and how there's been these same games being played, the same manipulation of the system with respect to the Hunter Biden alleged corruption with all the influence peddling and the money making that is alleged to have flowed to all members of the Biden family, about a dozen of them, including and not limited to the then Vice President of the United States, now President of the United States, Joe Biden. And the question becomes, are we going to get a real look at what's going on? Just last week, Congressman Comer and the Oversight Committee, the House of Representatives, laid out a point-by-point connection to to the Biden influence peddling scheme. And he laid it out there. Now, some people say, well, you didn't get a smoking gun against Joe Biden. But there's, as we say in the law business, there are the inferences. How did Joe Biden get all these houses? How did he have the flashy lifestyle that he had? How did he become a wealthy man on a government salary? These are all reasonable questions. If they were looking at Jesse Garcia, or Matt Taylor, or Richard Weinberg, or Eric Levine, they look at this and say, how do you guys have that kind of elaborate, exotic lifestyle when you don't have the income to show for it? And by the way, what did Hunter Biden know about anything when he was running around getting all these big fees? And I'm not talking about, legal fees at, $1,000 an hour. I'm talking about payoffs in the millions and tens of millions of dollars. And I'm not talking about a one-off. I'm talking about place after place, whether it was China, whether it was Russia, whether it was Ukraine, and other places as well. And by the way, Matt Taylor, you, way back when, did another movie. And what was the name of that movie?
It's called Riding the Dragon.
And what was that movie about? Tell us.
So we had been looking at Hunter Biden for a while. This is well before even the president had announced to run. And, because there's a lot of fishy things that were going on, especially after the Asian pivot in 2013. And it's funny you ask, will we ever know? Well, we do know because we have a laptop that actually tells us all the things that happened. I mean, I would say there's never been a better example of how backroom deals work than what is available to us now. That has also been routinely covered up and put aside by the intelligence community. So we do know how this family works. We know it intimately. We know emails going back and forth. We know photos. We know everything. And yet, you had Twitter shut down the fourth largest paper in America in 2020 for reporting on the fact that these things even exist. I would say that Joe Biden is the least vetted president probably in American history because we have all the things. And how does no intrepid reporter from any major news source want to look into these things? And now what you're seeing is people come around and say, oh, well, maybe we should have looked into that. When it was available, 2023? It's available almost 3 years ago. And of course, the intelligence community had it even before then. So we do know. It's just what's going to happen in Congress. Are they going to go after what is treasonous events that have perspired? That's really what we have to ask ourselves at this point.
All right, we have to take a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Our very special guest, Matt Taylor, the co-producer of the great movie, the documentary about New York City history, Gotham. We will come back. Jesse, I want to get your take when we come back from the break. This is Let the Record Show. Hold on for more interesting conversation.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party and our special guest, Matt Taylor, co-producer of the great documentary, Gotham, The Fall and Rise of New York City. Jesse, I want to pick up where we left off. What do you make about these allegations of Biden influence peddling and cover-ups and how it's impacted the election against Trump in 2020 and how we're going forward in this country now? What do you say about that?
I think that, one of the things that were said, I think Matt said it as we were closing, he said that, they have a pattern now of moving forward. And that pattern, when it was discovered in 2016 and after the special counsel's review of the Russia hoax went forward, the Democrats didn't stop. The Democrats, their allies in big tech, did not stop. They doubled down into 2020 election. As you said, Twitter and all social media platforms shuttered the fourth largest newspaper in the country with this Hunter Biden laptop. Now, we know that the Hunter Biden laptop now because those very same people who claimed it was a Russia hoax, like the New York Times, said, no, it's valid. My concern is that there has been an ongoing cover-up and protection status of the Biden family and Hunter Biden and his laptop. I don't know and I'm not confident that we will ever get to the truth, because you have the Department of Justice in a street fight, in an all-out war, shooting war with Congress on getting the facts of this investigation. They're putting roadblocks in the roadblocks. The whistleblower claims his information that contradicted the testimony by senior political appointees is no longer there. The whistleblower's protections from the IRS case are no longer there, are no longer in place.
Look,
There's
they
an
just
ongoing-
yanked, Jesse, they just yanked the special unit in the IRS that contained the whistleblower. They took them totally off the team. And we had Peter Schweitzer last night in Katz and Cosby, and his point was, and I think Schweitzer was exactly correct, which is they've taken the guys who know the story best of all, and it means that you have to go back to ground zero to start all over again. Is that a coincidence? We're coming up on an election cycle, Jesse?
Absolutely not. It's not a coincidence. It's purposeful. What I don't understand how Americans are not waking up to this. How the mass media, the mainstream media, is not waking up to this, because they're purposely part of this narrative, because they were burned by a Russia hoax, they were burned by the laptop, and now they have no place else to go. That's why I applaud the actions of the Congressional Oversight Committee to get to the truth, not for political purposes. Not for political purposes, but for the protection of our American institutions, so that we take the politics out of prosecutions, we take the politics out of investigations, and we take the politics out of a venerable agency like the FBI. And
the CIA and the other intelligence, right?
There are tens of thousands of law enforcement officers, intelligence officers who have placed their lives in danger for the protection of this nation. And I'm not speaking of them. The problems we're seeing here are at the upper management level, sometimes the mid-management level as well. That's where the politics, the internal politics of this deep state gets roiled and gets churned. That's what we need to stop. And I think that we should all rally behind this oversight committee, not for the purposes of electing a president, but for the purposes of writing and protecting important national institutions that we have here in America.
Well, that's very well said. And, the Democrats always say, this is all about, you have to stop the MAGA Republicans, you have to stop Trump, so you want to save our democracy. Let me say this, as the House Democrat, we want to save our democracy. That's why we have to get to the truth about what did Clinton do, what did Obama do, and what did Clinton and Obama know, and what did Biden do, and what did he do, and what did he know? And Matt, off radio, mentioned to me, and Schweitzer said it as well, that there's more than one laptop out there. And Matt, I want you to talk about that. Yeah. There are at least 3 laptops. And Matt, you said there's a lot more than has been disclosed.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of emails. I think it was like 33,000 emails or something on this laptop. It's a massive number. There were deals that haven't even been touched upon that they were working on. I mean, Hunter Biden was a very active young man, and I say this, in my experience, people like this don't end up going to jail. They don't end up getting nabbed. But here's the beauty of the American system. You can stop them at the ballot box. That's how you do it. And so, I encourage Americans who are concerned about the saving of our institutions, about the corruption within our government, to, they have to do what they have their right to do, and that's vote people out. I think in 2016, you saw that happen. You saw, a juggernaut, a $1.6 billion operation stop dead in its tracks. And so, if you want to stop the corruption, it's not going to happen from the inside. You're going to have to do it at the ballot box. And I encourage everybody to understand your power and your right as an American to stop these people dead in their tracks.
Well, my problem is that when I heard that they yanked the investigative team from the IRS against the investigation, these are people who had whistleblowers there, and they were yanked, and they weren't given whistleblower protection. And whistleblower protection, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, you should know this. You cannot retaliate against people or change their positions because they're doing their job and being whistleblowers. They yank them, and this, it seems to me, and let me coin a phrase, it seems to me this is a cover-up of a cover-up. This is absolutely reprehensible. So stop preaching in a self-righteous way about saving our democracy, because you, people in the intelligence community, in the FBI, in the Justice Department, you are the ones who are subverting our democracy, our institutions, and this has to change. The truth has to come out. Do you really believe that Hunter Biden was getting all this money because of his genius and his brilliance and his experience? What genius, brilliance, or experience did Hunter Biden ever have in his life? And now all of a sudden he's a painter, and people are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on his paintings, and he will not reveal who the buyers are? Are you kidding me? Or do you mean it? That's an easy way of washing money. And the other thing, look at the Secret Service. Bring up another agency. Secret Service first denied that there existed logs for visitors to the Biden home in Delaware. Now it turns out the Biden home in Delaware had lots of visitors, and there was a log, but now they're refusing to turn it over. Why are they hiding the truth from the American people? Aren't we entitled to know who is visiting Hunter Biden and Joe Biden at the Biden estate in Delaware? Because that may influence a determination whether, in fact, there was corruption. But you see, everybody is circling the wagons. They're trying to deflect from the reality. And this is a very, very important thing, and it has to be dealt with. Jesse.
Your Honor, I want to just jump on that for a moment because, it goes through this whole thing, investigations and the FBI and the politicization and all that stuff. It all dates back to, 2016, where it really got started. 2020, 22 elections. It was used in 22 elections. And as Matt pointed out, they already have the roadmap for 2024. Now, a lot of this has begun and all circles back to election deniers. MAGA Republicans in general, anyone associated who may have thought about a question regarding the results of the 2020 election because of COVID and weaponization and the changes of election laws throughout this country in different states. There were people who were concerned about the results of the election. There were variables and such. But they're true elections, and they're vilified. In fact, a number of our Republicans who just happened to have the question about election verification were vilified for this. They're called deniers. In actuality, the denying of elections occurred in 2016. As Matt and everyone has pointed out, there was not an assumption that Hillary Clinton was going to win the presidency in 2016. It was a matter of fact. It was a coronation that was just needed to get to the day for it to occur officially. And that, from that moment, when Donald Trump won states that were not won by Republicans, and he earned a presidency over the favorite daughter of Hillary Clinton, that's when the election denying began. That's when questioning of the elections and continued. And then all of a sudden, it became a Republican who did it. Anybody who questioned the results of an election, they became the deniers when, at its conception, it was Democrats, the far left, and progressives who began this because they had lost their bastion of power that they were preparing for in this coronation of Hillary Clinton in November of 2016.
Mr. Chairman, are you saying to me that there's a double standard? I'm shocked. Next, you told me
I'm just trying to play responsibility where it lands. I'll be responsible for tax cuts and law enforcement. They can be Democrats are responsible for far left policies that bankrupt us and also our election deniers.
But I'm shocked. I'm shocked. Just like Claude Rains said in Casablanca, gambling going on here at Rick's Place. I'm shocked. Here are your winnings, Commandant. All right, we're taking a break. Kevin has given us a sign. We'll be back for our final segment in a few moments. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, with our special guest, Matt Taylor, co-producer of Gotham, the great documentary about the fall and rise of New York City. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Hold on, and we'll be back in a few moments for the final segment of this week's show. Thank you.
This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
All right, this is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, with our special guest, Matt Taylor, producer of Gotham, The Fall and Rise of New York City, and I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Matt, you had a comment during our break. I'd like you to bring that up. Jesse and I want the audience to hear this. And then, Jesse, you want to begin the discussion about the border crisis.
Yeah, I think one final insidious piece to all of the topics we're talking about today, but especially in the context of Hunter Biden and things, is, of course, big tech's role. You know, Facebook and Google have become the arbiters of truth. Of course, we saw Twitter nuke the New York Post. But this has not stopped. The fact that they won't let you use the word recession in certain posts on Instagram is kind of bonkers. And so this game is going on, and it's hiding things, and it's going to affect Hunter Biden. It's going to affect the elections. It's going to affect the border. It's going to affect everything because these guys control all information, and they are stopping information from getting out there.
All right, Jesse, all yours.
Well, I think that we have said this, Your Honor, on this show countless times when we discuss the border issue and the border crisis. With the end of Title 42, we have always said every community, every neighborhood, every city is a border town at that point. And guess what? We were prophetic in that. We are now dealing with an influx of tens of hundreds of thousands of migrant aliens coming to New York City. And now New York City Mayor Adams is saying we're a sanctuary city. It was great for Democrats to say we were a sanctuary city when it was politically viable. Oh, my God, we are a sanctuary city, and we're being flooded with these migrant asylum seekers. We're to the tune of about $500 a day.
500 what? 500 what?
$500 dollars per day per person.
You mean to pay for that? To pay for them?
Exactly.
Yeah,
and here we are also.
Tens of millions of dollars, Jesse. Tens of millions of dollars.
In its cumulative number, absolutely. But now what's worse is that it's not a sanctuary city problem like Chicago or New York City. Now Mayor Adams, with his partners and Governor Hochul and the Biden administration, are trying to move these migrant voters into non-sanctuary counties and make them a problem for public safety, a health crisis, an educational crisis for our schools. These counties are not sanctuary cities, yet they're going to be expected to foot the bill and take on the burden of a public safety crisis, a health crisis, and a crisis in our schools. That's wrong. That's why I'm proud that Republican County Executive Bruce Blakeman and the Republican-led legislature in Suffolk County have said no. And here's what it is. They're fighting a tide here. Mayor Adams has another $1 billion with no strings attached monies that deal with this issue coming down from Hochul. And what are they doing? They're calling every hotel, every motel, and they're telling them, empty out your hotels. We'll pay you top dollar for a long period of time through a contract. They've been trying to do it in Riverhead, and the Riverhead supervisor stood up, declared an emergency, and said that this is not going to be allowed to happen when it was trying to be done in the cloak of night. The Republican-led legislature is meeting and issuing its tools legislatively and from a litigation point of view to prevent this from happening here in Suffolk County. This is wrong. This is the failures of the Biden administration, its immigration policies, its border policies, now not just in the southern border of our country, not in the northern part of our country. This is in the very streets of our neighborhoods. It's got to stop. It's got to end. And we need elected officials from every party with a backbone that says we will not stand for this. We need to protect our communities and our financial stabilities.
Very well said, Jesse. Let me point out Eric Adams, and I know Eric, and I like him personally, and I think in many ways he's the last great hope of New York City against the radical left, who are pushing their progressive agenda, which is very detrimental to public safety and to the future viability, both economically and socially, in this city, in this state. So I wish Eric Adams well, because God help us, the next so-called progressive that comes in and runs the mayoral office. We know what happened with de Blasio. But this is what Eric did wrong. First of all, he should not be shipping them outside of New York City because, as you correctly point out, Jesse, this is not a Suffolk County or Nassau County problem. This is not an Orange County or Westchester County problem. They have not been self-declared sanctuary cities, which, by the way, has no legal legitimacy. It's against the law to violate immigration law. You cannot give sanctuary when the immigration law says you shouldn't even be in the country in the first place. So let's go back to that. as you correctly point out, Jesse, this is a federal question. This is a national issue that falls at the feet of the Biden administration that has failed to fulfill their constitutional obligations to protect and defend this country, its national security, its public health, its social viability, its economic viability. They have failed. Disregard of their obligation to office, the oath they took. And it's not about sending more money from the feds to New York City or Chicago or anywhere else, or to give Nassau or Suffolk or Orange County more money. It's not about the Benjamins. It's about keeping people who have no right to be here, allowing them in this country. It's as simple as that. And you keep giving money, and they keep coming here by the hundreds of thousands and millions, you're going to run out of Benjamins to give out. And what are you supposed to do with all these people? You can't house them. So what are they doing in New York City? A few blocks from where I'm seated now, in the Roosevelt Hotel, a grand old hotel, they're going to have 850 migrants coming in the middle of Midtown Manhattan. We're trying to recover from the COVID crisis. We have a public safety issue. We're trying to restore the economic viability of the city of New York, and they're going to be dumping these people here, and we don't know who they are. Some of them may be very lovely people, but we don't know if they're terrorists. We don't know if they're rapists. We don't know if they're sexual predators, traffickers, drug dealers, whether they have diseases. We don't know if they have criminal records. Nobody's vetting them. They're just bringing them in and dumping them. So Adams has made the mistake because he's moving them out because now he realizes it's his problem, and he's trying to offload his problem. And the thing to do is to call out this president and this administration for failing their constitutional obligations. It's not about getting more Benjamins or shipping them out to the suburbs. All right? It's a terrible thing to do. And John Catsimatidis has been saying very, very clearly, said again last night, and we've been saying it for weeks, if you have an immigrant population crisis, don't put them in fancy hotels in good neighborhoods where you destroy those neighborhoods. And who's going to supervise them when you put them in the schools like Adams has been doing? You can't do that either. Who's going to protect these kids? Because you don't know who's in that room, in that gym. You put them in gyms? It's ridiculous. And you're going to put them in Central Park and have a tent city in Central Park and destroy that quality of life? What is wrong with these people? Put them on Rikers, take the jail cells off. You have buildings there. You want tent cities? Put them on Rikers. Put them in a contained environment where you get them the services they need. But remember this, you're going to run out of space in Rikers. You're going to run out of space in Central Park. You're going to run out of space in the schools. It's going to be every park, every community institution throughout the state that will have these people dumped on us. Matt, your turn.
Your Honor, I just want to make two more points to that, if I may. Number one, there's a problem because we've been hearing an absence of facts and a position of leadership by the Governor Hochul or by Eric Adams or any Democrat county executive, including the one here in Suffolk County, that has Steve Bellone, that has not said straight up what's going to happen, is allowing a vacuum to be filled with rumors. We've been dealing with situations where we've been hearing that Governor Hochul, Eric Adams, and Democrat county executives have given a wink and a nod to them utilizing federal properties in different counties, for them utilizing the SUNY school systems in different counties. And that's why the Republican county legislative majority take a position against that. The other thing is what you just described about where they're going to be housing them in these hotels and in these schools and in tent cities. That's not humanitarian. That's not a humanitarian way of handling this situation. If that's your goal, what that is, that's human warehousing, which should not go on.
Exactly. Kevin has given us that ultimate sign. The trap door is now opening, and not so slowly here at Let the Record Show. I want to thank our very special guest, Matt Taylor, for being here today. This is your second visit to our show. We love having you here.
Thank you for having me.
We want to bring you back because of your insights and your experience. And it's very important to have a clear, distinct voice here. And Jesse, once again, a great show. Thank you for co-hosting with me. You literally could not do the show without you. And I'm happy to have you here. This is Let the Record Show. We'll be back next week for more interesting conversation. We want to thank you. God bless America, and take care of your families. Thank you. Great show, Jesse.
Thank you.